Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today, I'm going to share my venison sliders recipe. Let's check it out. So for today, I'm actually going to make two versions of sliders because we have a big party out in the cul-de-sac with a bunch of neighbors, again, keeping our social distance. So I've got a pound of 85% ground beef for one set of sliders. And then for my second set, I've got ground venison mixed in with bacon as the second set of sliders. And this is what the recipe is going to be for this video. So to start, just gonna cut open my package of beef for the beef sliders here. I'm gonna put it into a medium-sized mixing bowl. Getting meat out is really hard. Where's the beef? Where's the beef? So I got the meat in the bowl to start, and then what I've got here is some Lipton onion soup dip mix. And so there's two packets that come in each one of these boxes. And so for each set of slider, I'm gonna have one packet for each slider meat mixture. So I got my packet of seasoning here. Just gonna rip this open. Just gonna add it straight into the bowl. Make sure you get all the stuff out of the nooks and crannies there. You don't want to leave any of the mixture into the container. And then one egg cracked. And then what you're gonna do is just mix the meat mixture with the seasoning and the egg with your hands. And then you're gonna form it into a patty about the size of the sliders that you're gonna make. So what you'll want to do beforehand is get your buns set up and measure how wide and how long your buns are to get your meat patty the same length. So I've got a small baking sheet pan here, and what I've measured is that my 8 slider buns is the exact size of this small pan. So what I'm gonna do when I've got all my meat mixed together is make it this size. So for every slider, you get a bite of meat all the way around the entire slider. So I'm gonna crack my egg here, and then this is the messy part. So roll my sleeves up a little bit, and then we're just gonna mix the meat gently with all the mixture here. You don't wanna over mix this because it'll get a little bit tough, and you don't want tough sliders. Trust me, don't ask me how I know. So we're just gonna mix this mixture in here. It will be a little bit of a wet mixture, but once you've got it formulated into a nice patty, that's when you know to stop mixing it so that you don't over mix the meat. Over mixing makes the meat super tough, so when you cook it and bite into it, it doesn't have that juicy burger taste on the slider. It just tastes like a tougher piece of beef, and you don't want that. It's not very good. Usually what happens, your wife gets mad at you for over mixing the meat. That's what happens. I'm a mixing my meats, I'm a mixing my meats, I'm a mixing my meats. All right, so the mixture's coming together here a little bit. I'm just gonna kind of, at this point, folding it over. Again, mix with one clean hand, or keep one hand clean and then mix with your other hand. That way you've got a clean hand to open or turn the faucet on and touch everything else. Okay, there's a couple more rounds here. It's starting to look good. All right, so that's about right where you want your mixture there. So you've got it nice into a ball, which is good. And now you've got your pan here. So what we're gonna do is with my clean hand, get the pan here. And then I'm gonna grab the meat mixture in one. It's exactly the way you want it. You want to make sure if it's in that kind of state where you can pull it out in one giant chunk, that's exactly what you want. So then we're going to flatten this out and obviously make it into the rectangle, the shape of the pan. But what we want to do is make it nice and even, because that way when you cook it and then put it onto the slider buns, it's nice and flat. I'm going to push the meat out to the corners here. Kind of just push it into the corners. Again, kind of spread it out and then get it into the corners, and then you just kind of want to flatten it out all the way around. All right, so I've got my pound of venison here that's ground with a little bit of bacon. So we're gonna put this in for slider mixture number 2.
I was listening.
Oh, drunk camera. All right, so we got our venison here. I'm gonna make sure to take the if there's any pad on there, you don't want to put that in your mixture. That would not be a very tasty slider, let me tell you that. Now with venison, because it's a gamey meat, a little bit of bacon's been added into this, obviously for flavor, but also a little bit of fat added, so it's not a super lean meat. But because venison is lean to start, this is super important on these sliders that you don't want to overmix these at all, because it's really easy to do that. And as I kind of described earlier, that leads to a really tough tasting slider. And you don't want your guests to have to bite into something that they don't like. You want the meat juicy and tasty, like a cheeseburger. It's basically a small cheeseburger, what a slider is, but you want to make sure that you don't overwork the meat. So now that we've got our meat processed and ready in the pans, we're gonna turn our oven on, crank it to 425, and then when it hits 425, we're gonna turn it down to 400, and then you're gonna cook the meat in each container for about 12 to 15 minutes. Make sure you get to that right temperature of 160 degrees. Once you hit that, take the meat out of the oven, and then you'll be ready to go to assemble the rest of the sliders together. All right, so we got our oven up to 425, and so what we're gonna do now is turn it down to 400, and then put our 2 sheet pans of meat in for about 12 to 16 minutes. We're looking for 160 degrees. So after 12 minutes, we're gonna put the probe in and check for the temperature to see if it's just right. One pan, pan number 2. Siri, start the timer.
Siri, start timer.
So an hour before, we made our caramelized onions. Now, the recipe is super simple. You got 2 yellow onions, you got a little bit of butter, and a little bit of olive oil. Chop your onion up, put everything into the pan, and you'll let the mixture go, stirring about every 5 minutes for about an hour, and you'll come out with these nice shiny caramelized onions. And the reason why you want the caramelized onions on the top of the sliders is it adds a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of tartness from the onion, and it also complements the burger mixture because it has that onion seasoning within there. And when you add the cheese and the pickles and the mustard, it just gives a little bit of that different texture when you're talking about biting into those sliders. So for our other toppings, we actually like pickles. Now, relish is a little bit sweeter. I like the saltiness and the tartness and the crunch of the pickle for sure. And what we'll do is take these little mini pickles and make nice about 1/4-inch slices of these small pickles, and we'll put those on top of the onions, on top of the meat mixture as we start to assemble the sliders. And that's about the thickness of the pickle that you want. They're nice and small, but you also got about 1/4, maybe a 1/2 inch, about a 1/4 of an inch, and it gives that nice crunch for something, if you want something that's not, say, a sweeter like a relish. All right, so slider buns. What we like for ours is King's Hawaiian. They're light, they're fluffy, and they've got a little bit of a sweet flavor that goes really well with these sliders, and especially the venison ones. I like the King's Hawaiian the most out of all the buns that we've tried over the last year making this recipe. So for this recipe, we're making 2 batches. So we've got a 16 count batch of rolls here, and what we'll do is, because we measured earlier, we'll have 8 and 8. So we'll cut these in half, and then we'll slice right down the middle, butterfly style, to get our buns in half and then start our assembly for our sliders. So to make it easier, I'm gonna break these in half into 8 bun sections. So break them apart carefully. So then the first thing I'm gonna do, actually, let's just set this here for a second. So what I'm gonna do is get about halfway, and then I'm gonna just cut across nice and slow on these slider buns. Put your hand, if you're cutting right-handed, you got your knife flat, and then put your hand on top of the buns gently. A nice set of buns. Perfect. So once your meat comes out and is ready, we'll put that right on and finish the assembly. All right, so we've got our meat cooking in the oven. I've got another sheet pan that'll fit both sets of sliders with a little silicone pad in it. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna transfer the bottom half of the buns into the sheet pan, and then once the meat comes out, we'll be ready to start the assembly. So put the meat probe in, probe right about 161, so took it out. The elk one was a little bit bigger, a little bit more meat, so we're gonna leave that in for about a couple more minutes. So, got our meat out, got it at the temperatures that we want, and now for the next part, we're gonna transfer the meat onto the bottom half of the slider buns on the sheet tray here. Got 2 spatulas. Yep, go Red Sox. I'm gonna get the spatula from both ends of the meat. I'm just gonna pick it up and just glide it over and set it right onto the sliders. This is, you want to be careful on this step not to spill, but you also want to get it centered on the sliders. Watch my elbow. Oh, there we go. Slide it right on there. Perfect. Almost to the edge. I shrunk a little bit on the beef, but that's okay. Almost get it in one. Oh, there we go.
Oh my.
There you go. Nice slab.
That is a loaf of meat.
Nice slab of fresh venison for your sliders here. Look at that. Look at that. Full coverage on the buns, if you know what I mean. So first step of the assembly, we're gonna take our caramelized onions, then we're gonna split it in half and half on each set of the slider buns. And what you wanna do is you wanna spread them out and make sure you get every single corner of the slider. You wanna have a little bit of caramelized onion in every little pocket and piece and taste of the slider. So we're gonna split this up. You wanna do, you don't wanna waste any of these, you wanna get your finger in here and just get all the onions off. All right, after caramelized onions, we're gonna put the pickles on next step. We're gonna spread them out nice and even across all of the caramelized onions. And by the way, shout out to Gabriel Rucker because he is the chef that inspired us to make these recipes. So if you don't know who Gabriel is, check out all of his social media pages, check out his restaurants. The guy is an amazing chef. He inspired us to make these sliders during the COVID pandemic. He did a live stream making these, and we just looked at each other and said, hey, let's give these a shot. And so we had a recipe we were working on for sliders, and it was perfect timing, and they turned out great. So thank you, Gabriel, for the inspiration for this recipe. Next step, we're gonna add in the cheese. I'm going with the American cheese because it's the best for the sliders. You can do other cheeses, but American cheese is the way to go. So we got our first slice here. We're just gonna layer over the top. There we go. And this is the fun part, especially if you got kids and want to get them involved in making this. Make them put the cheese on. It's the best part now. The part that I always enjoy the most because we're almost done. So last step, going with the mustard. Do not go with ketchup. Ketchup does not go on everything. You want mustard for your sliders. I just got regular French's yellow mustard here. So on the other side of the buns, we're just gonna do a little bit of a pass on both ways. There we go. Now, we're going to make sure we flip the buns on properly so that they match up to how they were put on there. There we go. All right, so after about 3 to 4 minutes of putting the sliders into the oven, the cheese is melted and you're ready to enjoy. So let's bite into these things. I'm gonna try one of the venison ones and I'm gonna try one of the beef ones, and I'm sure they're gonna be delicious. All right, and it's time to enjoy. So I'm gonna cut into this venison one and give it a taste here. There you go. Look at that. Look at that patty on that thing. That's delicious, huh? Super meaty. Love the cheese. The pickles and onions have that texture and flavor that you want, especially the sweetness of the onions. And then the bun, a little bit toasty on it. It's just perfect. The cheese is melted. These are delicious. For a family dinner or for an outing with friends, you know, keeping your social distance, these are perfect weeknight dinner meal. And you can have leftovers and have them for breakfast too. So they're just super delicious. And thank you, Gabriel, for inspiring us to make this recipe. These venison ones are delicious. I think I'm going to eat all of them, and I'll give the beef ones to my wife. All right, thank you guys for watching the sliders recipe video today. Now get out there and make your own version of those sliders and try something different. When you guys make this recipe, tell me what you did. Leave a comment below in the video and let me know what other variations you guys have for these sliders. And as always, everybody, the outdoors is a gift. Share it with others.